You'll remember that just a couple of chapters ago, the Israelites failed in bringing the ark up for one simple reason. They had not listened to what God had said about how the ark ought to be carried. What has happened then between chapter 13 and chapter 15 when they try again? Well, evidently, David has got his Bible out and he has read it carefully. He makes it very clear, verse 2, "No one but the Levites may carry the ark of God, because the Lord chose them to carry the ark of the Lord and to minister before him forever." We've been over this in recent chapters, but don't miss the fact that God gets to choose how he wants to be worshipped. Could the Reubenites or the Danites or the Benjamites, could they get a bit of a grump on that they are not the ones permitted to carry the ark? Well, they certainly could, but their tantrum doesn't change the truth. They are not permitted to carry the ark. Only the Levites can. And in fact, it was not listening to what God had clearly said that got them all in trouble 2 chapters ago. So this time they listen to him, and this time they do things God's way, and this time it all goes gloriously right. So, as they take the ark from the home of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, all the way up to Jerusalem, David's capital city, and into the tent that David had prepared for it, as they carry the ark, the people sing and they celebrate and they make music together. We read of lyres and harps and cymbals. This is the ancient equivalent of guitar, bass, and drums. And they are singing together as well. Kenaiah, the head Levite, was in charge of the singing. That was his responsibility. Verse 22, why? He was chosen on account of his skill. It was his responsibility because he was skillful. That's another really helpful lesson for us there. We should play to our strengths, and we should have the humility to do what will best serve the people. Can you imagine actually being in this context? And one or two might have got their noses out of joint a little bit because, well, Kenaiah led the singing last week and surely it's my turn by now. Well, no, the tasks are divided up, not according to what makes us feel good, but what helps us honour God. Now, over in chapter 25, we read about the musicians in the temple, and we read, listen to this, all of them were trained and skilled in music for the Lord. That was a requirement to be in the band. Now, I'm aware that we've got to use what we have, and not every church has a bunch of trained and skilled musicians, but it's an interesting thing to observe from the text here that people are clearly playing and singing, not for the sake of their own satisfaction, but for the sake of serving the people of God. So, as the musicians play and the people sing, David, we read, he begins to dance before the Lord with all his might. This chapter, by the way, clears up for us what might have been confusing for us in the Samuel account. You might remember that Michal, David's wife, she looks down upon the procession from her kind of lofty window, and she sees David celebrating, and she despises him in her heart. But what she says to him might cause us some confusion. She said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked, in full view of the slave girls and the servants, as any vulgar fellow would." That is the reason that she provides for why she is in such a royally bad mood. And that perception wasn't challenged in the Samuel account, but it is here. The thing clearly that annoyed her was seeing David so exuberant in his worship of God. This chapter in Chronicles helps us see that actually David was simply wearing what everyone in any position of leadership in the procession was wearing, a robe of fine linen, an ephod, which is what all the Levites who were carrying the ark and all the musicians and Kenaiah was also wearing. He was wearing a linen ephod like them, no more and certainly no less. So he's not unusual in this procession. No, the thing that clearly annoyed Michal was seeing the passion pour out of David. So delighted was he at the thought of God being present with his people in this place and all these glorious promises coming to pass before his very eyes. Other people's excitement about the word of God can sometimes expose our own coldness by contrast. We look down on people who we think are too enthusiastic, but often the only real reason for that is because it actually just exposes our own lack of enthusiasm. Without a doubt, she hated what she saw, and that hatred was really a commentary not on David, but on herself. And so what can we learn from this passage? Well, Our number one priority is to do what God says, not reluctantly, but with rejoicing, not begrudgingly, but gladly. This chapter is so glorious because everyone involved lives as God tells them to live. With submission and with great skill, they do what God calls them to do, and the scene is one of wonderful joy. All God's people gathered in one place, delighting in God's presence. It is a picture of the glory that is to come. It is a picture of the joy we will feel when we sing and celebrate our God and King, gathered together as his people, lifting up our voices and bringing him praise, knowing that at last his promises have all been completely fulfilled as we begin to enjoy his presence forevermore.